Welcome to episode 2 of Elise and Cyrus's story. You can find episode 1 in the videos listed for this channel. Elise froze midway through, pulling spare pajamas from her dresser, the fabric crumpling in her grip. "You're sleeping clothed," she said flatly, tossing the sweats toward him without looking. The bundle hit his chest with a soft thump, and Cyrus let out an exaggerated oof, clutching his ribs theatrically. "Bossy," he mused, but his smirk faltered when Elise turned around. He hadn't seen her in just a tank top and sleep shorts since they were teenagers. His gaze lingered on the scar above her collarbone, the one she'd gotten, saving him from a rogue wolf's claws. "Still got that, huh?" he murmured, fingers twitching like he wanted to touch it. Elise crossed her arms, suddenly hyper-aware of the heat creeping up her neck. "You're not sleeping naked in my room." She tossed him a second sweatshirt, one she'd stolen from him years ago, washed thin and soft with age. Cyrus caught it midair, his fingers tracing the faded UCLA logo before he smirked. "Kept it?" Elise's cheeks burned. "It was cold," she muttered, turning away to fuss with the firewood, anything to avoid his knowing grin. The sweatshirt smelled like cedar and the faintest trace of her lavender detergent, but beneath that, unmistakably, him. She jabbed the poker into the embers harder than necessary, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. Behind her, Cyrus hissed as he peeled off his torn shirt. The scent of blood and snow thickened in the room, mingling with something deeper, something that made her wolf prick its ears. "Easy, princess," he drawled. "If you stab that thing any harder, you'll put a hole through the hearth." Elise tossed the fireplace poker aside with a clatter and stalked toward her bed, yanking the heavy velvet curtains around it shut with more force than necessary. The metal ring screeched against the rod. "Good night, Cyrus," she bit out, her voice tight with exhaustion and something sharper, something that burned in her chest whenever his scent curled around her. "There are towels in the linen closet." Elise stripped off the sweatshirt she had on over her tank top with jerky movements, the cool air raising goosebumps along her arms. The bed smelled like lavender and the faint, lingering trace of Cyrus's wintergreen, probably from when she'd stupidly buried her face in his abandoned sweatshirt freshman year. Elise ground her teeth and flopped onto the mattress, pulling the duvet up to her chin like armor. Elise woke to warmth. Not the familiar cocoon of her own blankets, but the solid heat of another body curled around hers. Cyrus's arm draped heavily over her waist, his fingers splayed possessively against her stomach. His breath stirred the hair at her nape, even in sleep. The realization hit her like a punch to the ribs. She'd somehow rolled right into him during the night, her back pressed flush against his chest. Worse, her wolf purred in satisfaction, as if this was exactly where she belonged. She froze, willing her heartbeat to steady. Moonlight still streamed through the gaps in the curtains, painting silver stripes across Cyrus's bare forearm where it encircled her. His scent was everywhere, wintergreen and something darker, something that made her throat tighten. The sweatshirt she'd given him lay discarded on the floor, along with most of the blankets. Only the thin barrier of her sleep shorts separated her skin from his. Elise disentangled herself from Cyrus's embrace with the slow precision of someone disarming a bomb. One wrong move, and everything would explode. His fingers twitched against the empty sheets as she slid free, her wolf whimpering at the loss of contact. She dressed in silence, pulling on thick wool leggings and a fur-lined tunic, then slipped out before the first rays of dawn could betray her escape. The pack-house corridors were eerily quiet, the scent of damp stone and pine resin lingering from last night's chaos. Elise walked toward her father's study, the cold floor grounding her frayed nerves. Thomas stood at the window, his silhouette framed by the pale morning light filtering through ice-crusted glass. He didn't turn as she entered. "You're up early," he remarked, voice rough with exhaustion. Elise hovered in the doorway of her father's study, her fingers tightening around the carved oak frame. The scent of aged parchment and smoked leather curled around her, comforting, familiar. But beneath it lurked the sharp tang of adrenaline, the metallic bite of unsettled wolves. Thomas finally turned, his amber eyes flickering with the same restlessness that gnawed at her bones. "You look like you've been wrestling ghosts," he observed, pushing a steaming mug toward her. She ignored the tea, her nails digging into her palms. "I needed," her voice cracked, "air, space. To stop feeling Cyrus's breath on her neck like a brand. A task, something useful." Elise studied Thomas's face. She saw frown lines that only appeared when he was deep in thought. Elise's fingertips trembled against the mug's porcelain rim before she set it down untouched. Steam curled between them like a specter. "The avalanche," she said abruptly. It wasn't natural. The words tasted like frostbite. Thomas's knuckles whitened around his own cup. Moonlight carved shadows beneath his eyes as he studied the snow-crusted window. "No, he admitted finally, voice graveled with something darker than exhaustion. The scouts found blast marks near the ridgeline. Professional grade C4. By the scent. Elise's mug hit the desk with a sharp clink, tea sloshing over the rim. Who would? Her breath fogged the air between them, the study's stone walls leaching warmth even as fury burned through her veins. Thomas pressed a crumpled photograph into her palm. Blackened rock, jagged as torn flesh, the stench of cordite still clinging to the edges. Someone knew we'd all be here, he murmured. Every major pack, Heir under one roof. Outside, dawn bled across the snowfields in shades of bruised violet. Elise traced the blast radius with her fingertip, the numbers clicking in her mind with cold precision. This wasn't just sabotage, it was a statement. The math was undeniable, enough explosives to trigger the avalanche, but calibrated to leave the packhouse standing. They wanted us trapped, not dead. Yet. If you are liking the story, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thomas tapped the photograph with one blunt fingernail, the sound like a gunshot in the silent study. Council of Heirs convenes in 2 hours, he said, his voice stripped of any warmth. Your mother's already rousing the Blackwood boys. They'll want Dimitri's tactical input after his stint with Special Forces. His gaze flicked to the door, where Cyrus's scent still lingered like a ghost. And the youngest Blackwood has field medic training. We'll need that too. Elise's spine straightened at the unspoken order. She'd attended political summits before, but never as heir presumptive during an active threat. Who else? She asked, already calculating seating arrangements in the war room. Who'd balk at her authority? Who'd respect it? All of them. Her father's teeth gleamed in a sarcastic smile. Every pack heir who survived last night. He moved to the bookshelf, pulling down a ledger thick with territorial maps. Someone just declared war on the Sierra Nevadas. We answer as one. Downstairs, the great hall smelled of scorched coffee and wolf musk. A dozen alpha heirs clustered around the massive oak table, their injuries hastily bandaged, their tempers sharper than the mountain wind howling outside. Dimitri Blackwood stood nearest the hearth, his golden eyes tracking Elise's entrance with military precision. His twin Dominic lounged beside him, but there was nothing casual about the way his fingers flexed around his dagger hilt. Between them, Cyrus leaned against the mantel, his ribs visibly mending beneath his borrowed sweater, Elise's stolen UCLA one, she noted with a flush. Elise took her seat at the head of the long oak table, the carved Alpha Heir's chair groaning under her weight. The air hummed with restless energy, boots scuffing stone, low growls exchanged between territorial rivals, the acrid scent of adrenaline clinging to fur-lined jackets. Her father's presence beside her was a silent anchor, his massive frame blocking the worst of the draft from the shattered terrace doors. The sounds of the Omegas clearing the debris and snow from the damaged areas of the fortress could be heard faintly in the distance. Then the scent hit her wintergreen and iron, sharp enough to make her jaw tighten. Cyrus dropped into the chair to her left, close enough that his knee brushed hers beneath the table. Cozy, he murmured, flicking a glance at the empty space on her other side where protocol dictated an ally should sit. Cyrus looked to his brothers. Dimitri nodded and sat in the empty chair. Elise was surprised that his presence did not anger her. In fact, it was the opposite. It comforted her and made her feel anchored in a way she never had before. His borrowed sweater rode up as he leaned forward, exposing a strip of tanned abdomen above his belt. Elise pointedly focused on unrolling the tactical maps. Dimitri Blackwood cleared his throat from across the table, his Special Forces insignia gleaming in the firelight. Perimeters secure, he reported, tapping the northern ridgeline with a knife tip. Blast radius suggests professional-grade explosives planted at 3 key structural points. His golden eyes flicked to Elise, assessing. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit us. Dominic leaned forward, his usual smirk absent. And when? He tossed a crumpled program onto the table, the Solstice Gatherings itinerary, marked with every heir's scheduled appearance. They waited until all major pack leaders were accounted for. The room grew silent as everyone pondered who would be foolish enough to declare war on all the Sierra Nevada packs at once. And not only that. Why? Elise racked her brain, resting her chin in the palm of her hands. Suddenly, it dawned on her. The WSG. Elise whispered. Wolves for self-governance? Dominic said. Do you think they really have the numbers? And if they did, do you think they could organize? Cyrus rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It makes sense. They have been gaining strength. I saw them on campus a couple of times. Discreetly since it was a human campus, but they were there. Melinda, a healer and future Luna of the Black Moon Pack, asked, what is the Wolves for Self-Governance? The WSG is a group of wolves who believe that packs should vote for leadership. and that alpha positions should not be hereditary. Not rogues, but they believe that the current system of governing the packs is antiquated. Cyrus explained. So take out the heirs. Suddenly, there are no hereditary leaders. Thomas stated. So we know our why. Then there is just the second question. How are they organized? Elise said. She added. And what do they plan to do now that we are all here? Thomas stood up and knocked on the table. That is our task. The internet should be back up soon and the phone lines working. I want everyone gathering as much recon as you can on this group and see if we can find out who is leading them and what has changed. We will also start training 3 times a day so we are ready to coordinate defense if there is an attack. The avalanche took out the main road, which I don't think was planned, so we have at least a week before anything is getting up this mountain and before we can get out. Coordinate with your packs to send in reinforcements. Everyone began to file out of the room to eat breakfast and to prepare for the first training of the day. Elise, Cyrus, and his brothers walked toward the makeshift dining hall and the smell of bacon. I don't understand why attack now. The packs are becoming more democratic, and any wolf can become a ranked member. There are laws about treating all with dignity. And in theory, a bad alpha could always be removed by combat. That still hasn't changed, Elise said, shaking her head. Some people may think that it's not enough, Cyrus stated quietly. The scent of charred bacon and maple syrup clung to the dining hall's vaulted ceilings as Elise spread satellite images across the long oak table, her fingertips brushing against Cyrus's where he anchored the curling edges. His knuckles were still scabbed from last night's avalanche, the wounds healing slower than usual, a telltale sign of silver residue in the explosives. Dmitri leaned over her shoulder, his tactical knife pinning a grainy photograph of the blast site. See how the snowmelt pattern radiates? He murmured, tracing 3 distinct epicenters with his blade. Professional demolition team. Military training. Dominic slid a steaming mug of coffee toward Elise, his usual smirk replaced by a grim line. Which means they've got funding and intel. His thumb tapped the edge of a blurry security still, a hooded figure caught near the ridgeline 2 nights prior. Elise's wolf snarled at the familiar slope of those shoulders. Davis Cedarholt, she breathed, the name sour on her tongue. The same alpha heir who'd asked her to dance hours before the avalanche. She realized she had not seen him since their dance. Cyrus's growl vibrated through the table as he flipped open a laptop, his fingers flying across the keys with practiced precision. Davis transferred to Stanford's business school last semester, he muttered, pulling up a flagged email chain between Cedarholt pack accounts and several offshore shell companies. Right around the time WSR started receiving wire transfers from Geneva, the screen reflected gold in his eyes. Wolf and hacker merging seamlessly. Elise snatched the laptop, her pulse roaring as she scrolled through encrypted messages. Phase 1 complete. Heirs contained. Her nails dug into the keyboard. They're not just attacking the hierarchy. The realization hit her like a punch to the ribs. They're replacing it. She turned the screen toward Dominic, whose golden eyes darkened at the attached blueprints, detailed schematics of every Sierra Nevada packhouse, down to the emergency tunnels. Dimitri's knife embedded itself in the table with a hollow thunk, the blade quivering between them. Training starts now, he said, stripping off his sweater to reveal a torso mapped with scars. Full combat drills, no holds barred. The twins moved as one toward the courtyard, their silent communication speaking volumes. Elise followed, Cyrus falling into step beside her, his strides confident now that his wolf had healed his ribs for the most part. His fingers brushed hers, brief, electric, before he pulled away to roll up his sleeves, exposing forearms still streaked with dried blood. The courtyard smelled of snow and melting ice, the training dummies already shredded from earlier sessions. Melinda Blackmoon stood sentry by the weapons rack, her healer's hands deftly wrapping knuckles as heirs paired off. No shifting, she ordered, tossing Elise a set of padded gloves. Not until those ribs are fully knit, Blackwood. Cyrus bared his teeth but caught the glove she threw at him, his smirk returning as he flexed his fingers. Wouldn't want to disappoint my nursemaid. Elise lunged before he finished speaking, her knee aimed at his solar plexus, only for Cyrus to twist mid-motion, catching her leg against his hip. They crashed into the snow, his breath hot against her ear. Predictable, he teased, flipping her beneath him with a growl that made her wolf snarl in challenge. She headbutted him hard enough to taste copper, then rolled free as Dimitri's whistle pierced the air. Switch. Across the yard, Dominic sparred with Carson Rivers, their movements fluid as water over stone, until Dominic feinted left and Carson's boot connected with his ribs. The crack echoed off the courtyard walls. Silver-lined, Carson panted, shaking out his foot. They're armoring themselves. Elise wiped blood from her lip, her gaze locking with Cyrus's across the trampled snow. His expression mirrored her own realization. This wasn't just rebellion. It was war. Elise's muscles screamed with every step as she climbed the stone staircase to her quarters, her borrowed training gloves stiff with dried blood. The afternoon sun slanted through the arrow-slit windows, painting golden stripes across the worn steps. Behind her, Cyrus's uneven breathing betrayed his own exhaustion. She pushed open the heavy oak door to her chambers, the familiar scent of lavender and parchment washing over her. The velvet bed curtains still hung askew from last night's restless sleep. Elise barely had time to register the warmth of Cyrus stepping in behind her before the door clicked shut and his palm flattened against the wood beside her head. "Elise," he murmured, his voice rough from hours of growling orders in the yard. Snowmelt dripped from his hair onto her shoulder as he caged her against the door. The heat radiating off his body made her own sweat-slick skin prickle with awareness. His knuckles, rosy pink as his wolf healed them after they split from sparring, brushed her cheekbone, heating the skin as he touched it. Elise felt the mate bond pulling at her. She should push him away, should remind him of boundaries, of duty, of the war council convening at dusk. Instead, her fingers found the hem of his ruined sweater, her sweater, and tugged. "You're bleeding through the fabric," she lied, her throat tight. Cyrus laughed. He got closer to her. She could feel his breath on her lips. His eyes flashed gold. "I am not an heir, but I am still an alpha wolf. I am a fast healer." Elise swallowed hard. She felt the mate bond pulling at her, but the pack needed her. Needed them. She placed her hands on his chest and pushed him away, but gently. "We have a war council to prepare for." He smirked and stepped back, giving her space, but his wolf still prowled behind his eyes. "Then let's get ready." Elise turned and walked toward her wardrobe, pulling out fresh clothes, dark pants, and a fitted tunic lined with fur for warmth. She glanced over her shoulder. Cyrus was watching her, his gaze heavy. "You're staring," she muttered. "Can't help it," he admitted, voice low. "Mate bond." Elise's phone buzzed against the wardrobe door with the sharp, insistent rhythm of an emergency signal. The screen lit up with Davis Cedarholt's caller ID, the same smug face that had twirled her across the Solstice ballroom hours before burying them alive. Cyrus stiffened behind her, his wolf rumbling deep in his chest as she snatched the phone. "Answer it," he ordered, already moving toward the window, checking sightlines, escape routes, his body coiled for violence. Elise pressed accept. "Davis." Her voice was colder than the avalanche's debris field. "Elise." His greeting was all polished charm, the same honeyed tone he'd used when complimenting her dress before slipping explosives into the mountain's ribs. "Glad you're alive. It'd be a shame to lose such a spirited debate partner." "What do you want, Davis?" Elise asked impatiently. "You'll find out soon, little wolf." "You all will." What do you think Davis and the WSG have up their sleeves for Elise and the other alpha heirs? What is in store for Elise and Cyrus? Be sure to tune in for episode 3. If you like the story, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel.